Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. All right, guys, take a deep breath with me and go, what? Just breathe easy. They've been telling you to breathe easy. Pura vida, mi gente. Hey, what's up, everybody? Appreciate you guys tuning in. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. Yeah. Shout out to all the peoples, mi gente. Yeah. My peeps. Yeah. Mi gente. Mi tribu. Yo, I want a big shout out to the producers. We got Signs and Olmec 12. The soundtrack provided by these two brothers today. In case you're wondering, if you like any of the tunes. Yeah. Soundtrack. Signs Olmec 12. They in the chat. Let them know. So we're gonna go ahead and get into this topic. We've gone over it on so many different videos in so many different ways, but we're just gonna go ahead and go over um, a book that we know pretty well, you know, and we're gonna try to get, review for education purposes, fair use, for critique, criticism, commentary, under fair use. We're learning education. We're gonna read a chapter of a pretty good book. We gotta be ready to always dodge the hijack, of course. But we'll pull out a lot of babies out of this. And what I like a lot of it is source. So he has a lot of sources for what he's saying. So what am I talking about? All right, you guys will see right now. Okay, 1 second. Yeah. Again, shout out to the producers. Old world, huh? So we're in the book Africans and Native Americans, the language of race and the evolution of the red-black peoples. We dodged the hijack again, even with the title and everything. Yeah. We're gonna go ahead and go to chapter 3 real quick. If you guys don't mind. It says here. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you got the book. Yeah. It's very accessible actually. You can read it online for free, I have it in my Patreon. If you guys don't find it in the Patreon, let me know. I'll repost it. But pretty good. I have an original PDF, version. But anyways, it says here, Negro, Black, and Moor. The evolution of these terms as applied to American Indians and others, Native Americans, yeah. Different tendencies in the use of Negro and Black. In 1854, the California State Supreme Court sought to bar all non-Caucasians from equal citizenship and civil rights. The court stated, the word black may include all Negroes, but the term Negro does not include all black persons. Huh? Make it make sense, yo. What you talking about, Willis? We are of the opinion that the words white, Negro, mulatto, and black person, whenever they occur in our Constitution, must be taken in their generic sense, that the words black person in the 14th section must taken as contradistinguished from white and necessarily includes all races other than the Caucasian. Huh? Say what? That's just like babbling, guys. And look what he says. As convoluted as the quote may be, it expresses a strong tendency in the history of the United States, a tendency to identify two broad classes of people, white and non-white, citizen and non-citizen, or semi-citizen. Starts to hide that with all these tags, right? Corporation. The tendency to create a two-caste society often clashed with the reality of a territory which included many different types of people. Very important. Not just by crayon colors, okay? Yeah. So many different types of people of all colors. and different degrees of intermixture of European, American, so-called African, and Asian, right? Wonder what they mean by African, right? Are they adding the false, millions of Africans brought from West Africa theory that they try to push into us? The idea when we look at the primary sources, we're seeing a whole different people being enslaved. And very few West Africans, like, depending on who you're talking about specifically, too. Let's get to the sources. So, basically, the point is, hey, there's people here. There's different types of people, all types of so-called colors, right? In the Americas. So how do you class all these people into two different categories only? Okay. American Indian people, whether of unmixed ancestry or mixed with other stocks, were at times affected by the tendency to create a purely white, black social system, especially when living away from a reservation or the tribal homeland. In the British slave colonies of North America, along the Atlantic coast, many persons of American ancestry were at times classified as blacks, Negroes, mulattoes, or people of color. And these terms were, of course, used for people of, they saying African or words associated to being African, like the AI corrected itself with me. Yeah, these are words associated, but not necessarily meaning or can prove that any of these people are African. Oh yeah, we know that already, Mr. AI. So the manner of which Americans and part Americans were sometimes classified as mulattoes and people of color. When you say American, they mean American Indians, right? From New England to South Carolina and in the colonial empires is explored elsewhere. The purpose here is to illustrate how the term Negro has also been applied to people of American descent. Say what? The word what? The word Negro to who? Has been applied to people of American descent. People of American indigenous people, guys. Okay? So when you're saying, oh, the Negro got sold, you're finding all these wills, don't assume the guy who's in charge is just a white man, who's passing away his African slaves. You got to have context, because a lot of the times the term Negro was being applied to American Indians, as it says right here. So what I tell people is, what Negro? Show me individually, who is that person? Give me his name. Who are his parents? If you don't know, then stop adding to it. The concept of Negro needs first to be analyzed in terms of its historical development. As noted elsewhere, the late medieval period in Italy and the Iberian Peninsula saw people being variously classified as Albo, Alvi, Blanco, Branco, white, Nero, Negri, Negri, or Negro, and you guys see the words, right? I ain't trying to get them to, Preto or black. And as of intermediate colors, Lauro, Loro, Jord, Berrettini, Rufo, Pardo became brown. The Pardos, the last name, became the Browns, anglicized, Olivastre. I'm not saying all Browns, but a lot of them, etc. It is apparent from the evidence that the term Negro or its equivalent was not used for a race or for a single stock of people or to point to ancestry or ethnicity. It was usually a simple description for perceived color or appearance. You guys understand? Let's giving you a little drop here. It is apparent from the evidence that the term Negro or its equivalent was not used for a race or for a single stock of people, or to point to ancestry or ethnicity. It was usually a simple description for perceived color, talking about what you look like. Didn't matter if you were American Indian or a Black European. We find many instances where de color negro, of the color black, right, in Spanish, is used when describing persons, or negro algo loro, somewhat loro, or loro casi negro, loro almost black. That is, it is quite clear that a perception of color is being described, and not ancestry. Not ancestry. Again, not ancestry. So he's talking about the physical. Okay, but who's his people? Who's his grandparents? Who's his great-grandparents? Who's his people? You're not talking about ancestry, guys. You gotta get off the crayon colors. That is, it is quite clear that a perception of color is being described. A perception of color, a perception, and not ancestry, ethnicity, or race. Okay? Muslims or Saracens are often described, as noted earlier, in terms of being Negro, Blanco, or Loro. Again, Muslims being called black and white. For example, is what he's saying. Hey, Mystery Plus, much love. Thank you for dropping by. I appreciate the donation. Thank you. We find many, sorry, I got that already. It says in 1543, the Spanish crown ordered that mulattoes could not be taken as slaves to the Americas under the general license for esclavos negros. What? So who they trying to make the general perceived look? Who they look at this? Listen to this. Don't take the light-skinned people or the ones that look like mulattoes from Europe as slaves. Bring the darker ones. What does that start creating? Almost like a white superiority. That's pretty crazy right there. So this is what they're saying. En virtud de nuestras licencias generales para pasar esclavos negros a las Indias, se llevan y pasan algunos mulatos y otros que no son negros. Yeah, that's what they're talking about. Wow. In brief, mulatto and other slaves who are not Negroes were forbidden to go to the Americas without a special royal license. Are they calling a lot of these mulattoes, these are probably American Indians they ain't trying to send back? Thus, in the late medieval and early modern period, there is no equivalent to the recent North American tendency to utilize the terms Negro or Black for persons of alleged Negro or Black ancestry. All right, he's giving major drop here, right? So what we're learning about in these medieval writings and stuff, they're not really focusing on people's complexion like that. So people assume everybody's just white, so-called white, pale skin. They assume all these Europeans in medieval times, all these knights, all these castles are filled with only one color of people, right? Only one complexion shade, and that's not true. So when did this really start? You see, like all this, the classification, caste system, like, yeah, like during the whole colonization of the Americas, you know, they're like reclassifying so many different peoples, especially the American Indians. People were usually described as black, olive, brown. So they're talking about in the medieval, early modern periods, right? People are usually described as black, olive, brown, red, copper, or whatever, according to their skin or hair color only, not according to a racial scheme. Not because you're using black and white as a racial thing now. Not literally looking at a person, even if he might be a light-skinned, so-called black person, you still call him black, right? On the other hand, there was a tendency to allow utilize the term Negro or its functional equivalent Moor, German, Dutch, French, in a very broad sense. All right, in a very broad sense. It starts becoming a generalization, a generalized tag. Albrecht Dürer, for example, although certainly aware of the existence of Americans, is recorded as stating that there were only two types of human beings, white and black, or more in parentheses, right? So now he made anybody that you would put under category of so-called black as more too. You see, now that both become a generalization. Again, trying to split the whole world into two categories. That's crazy. Hey, much love, G-Play. Appreciate you. The Portuguese, as we shall see, also tended to use the term Negro to encompass many non-Africans. Okay. So, gonna highlight this. These are notes, guys. Like, these are notes. I'm helping you take notes, you know. So the Portuguese, as we shall see, also tended to use the term Negro to encompass many non-Africans, people whose skin color was a shade of brown. Okay. People whose color was a shade of brown. I wonder how many people fall under that. Raise your hand. How many people fall under that? A shade of brown. Wow. It would appear that, in this sense, black can be conceived of as the opposite of white, and in a dualistic mode of thinking, all humans must logically fall into one of the two categories. And this usage, Negro or Moor, almost becomes equivalent to non-white or third world in recent usage. We must, however, briefly explore the use and meaning of Moor, Maori, Moro, Negro, etc., before arriving at any premature conclusions. Nevertheless, to summarize, we can say that by Negro and equivalence is meant a range of color shades. A range of color shades. A range of color shades. For humans, generally dark browns, always less extreme than true black, all right? Actually dark brown than black, right? But approaching the darkness of black, and also including very often people of medium shades of brown, whose color seems to contrast sharply with white or clear shades, okay? A brown whose color seems to contrast with white or clear shade, but he's still black, right? The issues involved in the perception of brown and other shades of color intermediate between black and white will be discussed early in the next chapter. Here we will proceed to illustrate how terms meaning black have been utilized for peoples whose skin colors are often of various lighter shades. People who can pass for white, right? So this is what we're saying, guys, like how they categorizing people based on physical and not, or what they thought of the person, try to put them in a certain status. Always not about the actual complexion or color of the person. So it has been used, black, on peoples whose skin colors are often various lighter shades. Latin, and you see the word, right? Niger, would seem to be the predecessor of Spanish and Portuguese. Negro, Catalan, that word, Italian, Nero, French, noir, or black, and negre, black, or dark person. These terms correspond to Dutch. Listen, all right? People think we just be making this up. These terms, I'm gonna highlight this, take notes. Everybody who's still doubting about what we're saying, the word Swarty literally means. These terms correspond to Dutch swart, Swart, German Schwarz, English black. Swarty has come to be equivalent to dark rather than black. But they correspond with the German Schwarz, which English black. And now they try to make, oh, it just means a little dark tan. No, it doesn't just mean that. As applied to humans, these terms do not necessarily imply a true black color, all right? Nobody's really black. Ain't nobody creating colors. As applied to humans, these terms do not necessarily imply a true black color, but merely a range of dark shades, approaching black or reminding one of black. Thus, there is a considerable range for interpretation. An early Spanish-French dictionary, 1607, translated Spanish Negro as being equivalent to French noir, sombre, obscure, offusque, brun. Negro de la Guinea is equivalent to a negre or Moor, as will be noted in the case of Dutch. The above allows for dark, obscure, oscuro in Spanish, right? Dark, and brun. Brun, remember that means, yes, also a so-called black person, to be subsumed under Negro, and uses French more as equivalent to a Negro from Guinea. Oh, from Guinea, not from America. Huh? Anyways, but you see, they're just using that word more a lot of times as a general tag. Okay. I mean, these are things a lot of people know already, but this is a lot of people don't think about these things. Like, we get caught up in the whole caste system mentality and looking at people physical and judging, you know. So it says Latin came to mean Negro or black, but also various shades of so-called obscure color, example, darkest shades, for which terms such as fuscus, pardo, and loro were often used in later times, all right? These terms they were talking about black folks, melanated people. Moreover, derivatives such as moreno acquired meanings distinct from but related to Negro. A 1607 dictionary states for moreno, brun, nor, obscur, color de olives, quite a range. Quite a range, right? In any case, one can see that more group of terms in various languages did not refer to absolute black or to blackage alone, but could indeed refer to a range of darker skin colors. This is also true as regards NIGRI, right, and its forms. For example, a 1494 source states that the king of Portugal possessed pretos de varios cores, acobreados, pretos, e negrados, like, so they're saying black folks of various colors that the Portugal king possessed, right? Who were the Portuguese and Spanish enslaving again? In general, at first, who got where, you know, the records, we know. They were bringing them back to Lisbon, Seville, yeah, we know. Habet item rex, and then, you know, in Latin, right? Clearly the term of Negroes next to Negroes indicate a variation, while preto black encompasses all of the stated colors, copperish or reddish, and so on. Even those, all right, started being called so-called black. Copper-colored tribes of America. An Irish Gaelic saga of the 900s, copied in 1643, states that Danish-Irish raiders attacked Spain and Mauritania in the 800s. From the latter place, they carried off a great host of them as captives to Erin. And these are the blue men of Erin. For Maori is the same as black man, and Mauritania is the same as blackness. Long indeed were these blue men in Erin. Guys, hear this? These blue men, these were black folks, right? The Gaelic text uses Maori and Negri and Mauritania and, you know, that word right there. Obviously borrowed from Latin, the concepts of blue men is described in original Gaelic words. Yeah. So Swarty Somebody's asking, does Swati mean dark for Caucasian? Listen, people started using it for meaning dark in general. So yeah, white folks try to use it. Oh, I got a little swarthy. They're just meaning I got a little darker, right? But just the logic behind it, why would it that word be used in general for the word dark? Think about it. There's an origin. So when we know the origin of the word was being applied to people from, you know, the continent of Africa, so-called Black Indians in the Americas, Black Asians, like they use that word on Black Europeans, like for sure. And when you go to all the old dictionaries for the word swat, it'll tell you straight up. Definition number 2, so-called black, is equal to black. They're like, they just told us right here. All right, so don't let the cognitive dissonance start kicking in. You guys gotta understand, we have the research, we have the sources. If you ignore that, you're just practicing cognitive dissonance, and that's okay. That's a natural reaction. But you got to get over that, because this ain't personal, right? History is not personal. It's emotional. Truth hurts. I get it, but it's not personal. Okay. From this text, we can see how the term Maori for Negro spread to Northern Europe, and at the same time, how both words could be used for shades of brown. Since from our modern perspective, the Mauritanians, Berbers, Moors, and others are not regarded as being black or blue in skin color, it may be, of course, that they have become much latent due to mixture with Romans. What Romans? Romans were so-called what? Black or blue? Spaniards, Arabs, and Vandals, all those people. What are you talking about? These all melanated people, and so on. But some of the change in color could have preceded the 800s. There's conjecturing, like, hey, maybe they got lighter from these, but maybe, or maybe this, maybe. Sacco describes the berberiscos, or this, as being fusky, or dark, moreno, and aceitunado, olive color, in a study of ancient slavery. The use of Moor in the Dutch language will be discussed below, but here it is useful to note that the medieval Dutch understood by that term a very dark color. All right, that's what they understood by that, a very dark color, so that the color of coal was compared with that of a Moor. Also, it was said, skint short. Okay, you guys, that's the Dutch. He is a black as a Moor. The spread of Maoris to the north can also be seen in Scotland, where in 1504 and 5 several references to Moor lasses or Moor lassies are found. At that time, a child was born referred to as Morris Barn, a Maurus born. Late in the 1512 to 13, one finds Ellen Moore and Black Eileen used, one assumes, interchangeably. By 1527, Eleanor the Black Moor is referred to, while in 1567 to 59, they are referenced to Najir the Moor. All right. So again, very wide, generalized terms. You gotta understand who they really talking about, understand their ancestry, who their people are, and see if it's the same as what a lot of people think of Moor is. You guys will see. Like, you guys start comparing. Don't assume you guys, oh, I know what Moor means, and he knows what Moor means. He might have a whole different idea of Moor than what you're thinking, and what I'm thinking based on what I'm researching on the history of this word. As an origin to everything, right? The Portuguese use of Negro for Americans, okay? So this is what we were basically coming here for, right? He broke down a lot of things. He's trying to clear people's stereotypes and ideas of color and all that. So he did a pretty good job, I guess. Remember, this book, I believe, written in 1990s, in the 90s. So, we've learned a lot since then. But we still appreciate the work people like Jack Forbes has done, right? With these kind of things, bring up the subject matter, right? Now it says, insofar as the use of Negro or its equivalents for Americans is concerned, it is well to begin our analysis with a brief review of usage in the Portuguese language. First, it must be noted that Europeans generally regarded the Americans as being of an intermediate color. Listen, Pardo, Laurel, Beretino, or Olivastre. All right. He just broke down that these words were being applied to people of dark complexion, so-called black, right? He just already broke that down. So this is the same words they're using to describe a lot of the Indians, right? Hold on. This is bugging out, man. For example, in 1519, it was said of the Brazilians, non sono né neri né blanchi, ma di color di olivo. They're not black or white. They're like more like olive color. That's what he's saying. That is, they are not black or white, but of olive color. But the same writer also remarked that the Brazilian canoemen he saw were so black, so-called black, so swarthy, that they could have been taken for sailors on the sea of Styx in hell. Whoa. Yeah, that's very racial way to say that, right? Like, but you see what these are the sources we always pull up. This is what I'm saying. So we pull up these sources from the 1500s, right? We got a Portuguese describing the Indians they saw in the canoe in the jungles of Brazil. They were so black, right? So-called black. Another Italian in 1533 described them as di color olivastro, a più presto negri, that is olive colored and almost black. Almost black, huh? In 1492 to 93, the Caribbean islanders were said to be of Loro color. Remember, that was dark complexion. White more than black. So a little lighter than black, right? But in 1524, the Carolina coast people were said to be of dark color. All right, not much unlike the Ethiopians. Did he just make this up? No, right? We know where he got that from. He got that from Verrazano. He got that from Verrazano, and he traveled the east coast of the Americas. So now he's saying the Carolinas, right? So in the 1520s, Verrazano saw Indians from the Carolinas, and he said these people are of a dark color, not very much. When they say not much unlike, they mean very much like the Ethiopians, with lighter colored people farther north. And then he said when we read the whole book, well, that whole quote, there's another section where he's saying they all dark just like the other ones. Thus a range of color was perceived, with some being almost white and some of darker shades. Almost white, darker shades, copper colored tribes of America, from the lightest copper to the darkest copper. We got to kill our own prejudices and hijacks. Hey guys, let me know if the music's ever too loud. You know, I can't really hear it. Just let me know. From 1549 through 1565, the letters of Jesuit missionaries in Brazil, usually addressed to colleagues in Portugal or Spain, frequently referred to the Americans as Negroes, as well as using terms such as gentios, pagans, brasis, and other forms of Brazilians and Indios. Pagans, huh? So pagan became a race. In April 1549, Manuel de Nobrega, the leader of the Jesuits, addressed a letter from Bahia to Simão or Senhor Rodrigues in Lisbon, in which he refers to the Portuguese in Brazil as living in sin because of their having many Negroid women, right? And lots of children by the said black women. All right, so who are these women they're calling the N-word, right? Or Negro, right? Who are they dealing with, right? They're dealing with Indians. So they're mixing with the dark-skinned Indians, how they calling them, right? Negroes. And having lots of children with these so-called black women in parentheses. The editor, Serafim Leite, notes in a footnote, Negroes, isto, mujeres, indias. All right? All right? Translate that. That's Portuguese. Who are they talking about? The mujeres indias, or the Indian women. It says Negroes and Negroes de Africa, also having Nabar. So a few lines later, Nobrega refers to the Indios de esta tierra, right? The Indians of this land. All right, I'm about to show you guys a book, right? Thus, the Jesuit father called the American women living with Portuguese men Negroes, right? They were calling them so-called black, all right? Primary sources, guys. This is the ones I haven't even showed. I think I might have showed this source. Like, I got a lot of sources in my old videos where we went over this stuff because we were trying to prove something back then. We ain't trying to prove this anymore. We're trying to get over this and have much more understanding. It's more complex, all right? But we're going over it for better understanding again. Review. So, what are they calling the Indian women? Right here. You see it right here, right? A term which, according to Leite, could not have denoted people from Africa. They're not talking about Africans because in 1549, there were few or no African women in Bahia, all right? Body bag for the illusion. Boom, that's it. I feel like throwing my computer on the floor. What you trying to say? These were probably Africans. Oh, yeah, Kurimeo, but those they were talking about Indians who had mixed with Africans. What you talking about? You don't know history. In 1549, there was no African women there. What you talking about? You guys hear? This is a big one right here. Big one. This alone should just debunk all their false history. This alone, this one little example. But we got thousands of examples like this. Shout out to Drop, yo. Con Drop. Body bag for the illusion. All right. Ain't no African women in Bahia at that time. Stop making things up. Nonetheless, Nobrega also uses the word Indio. Either way, he's telling you he's speaking about the Indians. This pattern is repeated time and time again, as we shall see. What does it signify? Again, this pattern repeated time and time again. What? What pattern? Of them calling Indians so-called black or Negroes. This is what I was saying earlier, guys. So when you see people being called Negroes in these whales or Negro slaves, all right, you hit the thunder. Oh, we breaking spells. So, you know, you got to think about it. What Negroes? They were calling Indians Negroes, and they were calling black Europeans Negroes. So what does this signify? It would seem that the Indios or Brasis of Brazil were in fact both Negroes and Indios. Yo, I didn't say it. You guys understand? And if you don't understand, then you just cognitive dissonance. It's all right. If it helps you sleep at night, not understanding what is clearly being said here, and then you're trying to say we trying to blackwash and steal somebody's culture and all that. When I'm not even so-called considered black, you think I'm call myself a crayon color. That's not why I'm doing this. Truth is truth. History is history. All your beliefs, that's your opinions. That's just your religious mind state. Because Indians were simply a special regional kind of Negroes. We must bear in mind that Brazil was part of Las Indias or India. All right, it was part of what? India, the real India superior. And that the geographical designation for people native to that would be Indian. But in addition to a purely geographical designation, they might also be considered to be Negroes, even as the people of India proper were often called Negros, as we shall see below. In addition to being Indios, the coastal Brazilians were also called Brasis because they resided in that part of India called Brazil. Now, let's see, be ready to dodge the hijack, right? It says when Africans are referred to in the Jesuit letters, they are always called Negros de Guinea, right? They mean the ones from West Africa, or do they mean that, or do they mean Guyana, Guinea, Guyana, huh? Either way, distinguish them from the Negros de Terra, the blacks of the lands of America. All right, there was two different categories where they were clearly making a distinguishment of the black, so-called black people of the Americas, indigenous, with any other black coming in. Okay, now let me show you a book real quick, right? Let's see if I can get it up. Don't worry. Don't worry. Got a good video coming out on Brutus of Troy. All right. Here we go. All right. The Negroes of the Terra, or Indians, banderistas of Sao Paulo, right? Negroes of the land, talking about Indians, guys. So when they say they captured some Negroes off the coast of South America, and these so-called Negroes made their way to Virginia in 1619, these 20-odd Negroes, then it's conjecture to say they're Africans when we know they were calling people in Central and South America Indians. They were calling them Negroes. It's more logical to reason more historically than to make up false stories where you got people lying down in a ship and all that. Like, it doesn't even make sense. Millions of people, like, and they got no stories of that. The local people had no recollection of any of their people being taken. You got to break the spell. Okay. Race before racism, the disappearance of the American. Oh, we got a lot of stuff we got to read. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, we're not there yet. Let's go back to the book, yo. Hold on. Where's the book? So, to distinguish them from Negroes of the Terra or the blacks of the land of the Americas. Okay, this is a real thing. This is how they wrote and described the Indians they were dealing with, the Portuguese, the blacks of the Americas and the blacks of Guinea, like, you know, distinguishing them. In August 1549, Nobrega wrote to Rodriguez in Portugal about the Portuguese men and their, it says here, you know, Negroes, or the women Negro, right? Or mistresses. Talking about Indian women. He also referred to Os Negros who were being enslaved, and to the Carijos as Negroes, right? An Indian tribe. They were calling what? Negroes. Okay? A lot of drop. Right now in this little segment, a lot of drop, a lot of sources. He's got the footnotes. He's not making any of this up. We can verify this, and we will. Of course, most Portuguese possessed mistresses or wives who were American. American, that's who they're calling so-called black in these records. That's who they're calling Negroes. This is their Negro wife. They're talking about American Indians, okay? In June 1551, Brother Diego Jacome wrote from São Vicente to the Jesuits of Coimbra, Portugal, referring to Americans as Os Negros, okay? Another primary source calling American Indians Negroes. From where? São Vicente. Are you talking about Cape Verde, one of the Cape Verde Islands, where they had a lot of American Indians? In August 1551, from Pernambuco, Father Antonio Pires wrote to Coimbra that the Negroes are now very calm. Also from Pernambuco in August 1551, Nobrega requested from King John II alguns escravos de Guinea as servants for the Jesuit Colegio de Bahia. So King John II, huh? King John II. That reminds me of something. Hey guys, you didn't tell me I wasn't showing you the book, guys. Yeah, my fault. Either way, we're here in the internet. All right. I was actually reading, guys, the book. My fault. So let me see. The King's Fountain. Lisbon, Portugal. You're talking about King John, huh? King John II. La Chariz del Rey, Chafariz del Rey. Hey, real quick, guys. Why am I showing you this? Well, they just mentioned John II, right? King John. That's King John right here. You see this guy on the horse with the knight's emblem on him and all that? The knight is San Diego, I think Santiago, something like that. That's King John right there. This is Lisbon, Portugal, right? Black folks and light-skinned folks, all different types. You know, that's King John right here. I got a video on this, okay? All right, how do I get it? Oh. Negro's the terror. Hold on, let me go back. I thought I went back to the book. You guys see the book now, right? Okay. So he was saying that Nobrega requested from King John II algunos escravos de Guinea. So I know you guys didn't see this, but look, this is what I was saying, reading just now. That they were calling American Indians Negroes, okay? So these mistresses, these wives, they were American Indians, all right? In June 1552, Antonio Pires, writing from Pernambuco to the Jesuits of Coimbra, stated, Anesta capitania grande escravaria, así de Guinea como de terra. Ooh, all right. I understood that, because I could understand if I read Portuguese. That is, Pernambuco possessed a great number of slaves, both African and American, and they had a confraternity of Our Lady of the Rosary, the common confraternity of slaves in Portugal, as noted earlier. The editor, Serafim Leite, notes that Confraria do Rosario in Pernambuco seems to have been, for all slaves, American as well as African, all right? So interesting to see who they call an African. This is what I'm saying. So we're gonna follow up on the source and see who, if they have any names of these people, what they saying, because there could be other Indians they bringing from North America. It could be other, it could be Indians coming from Cape Verde coming back. Like we know they were bringing Indians to Lisbon, to Seville, and then bringing them back to the Americas. Or could they be talking about Black Europeans? We know hundreds of thousands of them got sent here to the Caribbean, to the plantations, okay? In July 1552, and again on several occasions. Oh, sorry, I lost. Through 1558, Nobrega asked for 3 or 4 slaves from Guinea for the Jesuit college. A very interesting letter is one prepared by those meninos de Colegio de Jesús de Bahia, that is by the young Americans studying in the school, Yogo, Topinamba, Peribira, Mongueta, and Quantia. Although probably edited by a Jesuit, this may represent the first letter written by Americans in a European language from Brazil. In it, they refer to an American leader, El Grillo, as a Negro, all right, an American Indian, right? And to other natives as Negroes. We find, for example, El Grillo, who is a Negro very well known and feared among them, and that El Grillo es negro muy grave. El Grillo was at the same time an Indi pagan and a friend of the Portuguese. Right? He's an American Indian, guys. This is what they're calling him. In August 1552, Nobrega wrote from Bahia to Lisbon, referring to the native people as Negroes. Okay? Oh, we're gonna get Nobrega's first-hand account. Watch. In May 1554, Antonio Blasquez from Porto Seguro wrote to the Jesuits of Coimbra that Yo estoy en este puerto seguro y la vida que hago y en lo que me ocupo es esto. Enseño la doctrina a los negros y negras. Wow. He said, okay, let me read the English. That is, he was preaching to the Americans called Negroes. All right. Basically, is what he was saying. He was telling them how he was evangelizing them. And who is he calling Negroes? The American Indians and the missions. Guys, this is real history here. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Wake up. This is big right now. Like, he's just dropping bomb after bomb, which you can verify. Appreciate everybody that's tuning into the live. Hope you're enjoying it. Pretty cool. I haven't been able to go live, around this time, but it's pretty good. We can start the week strong like this. All right. Yeah. In August 1552, Nobrega. Okay, we got that. My fault. So he's calling all these Indians. He also referred to the Negros and Los Mamalucos de esta tierra as pupils. The editor knows that by Negros and Negros, he meant Indios and Indias, right? He meant indigenous people. That's what he meant. In 1556 or 1557, Nobrega prepared one of the first works of literature written by a European in the Americas, a fictional dialogue on the question of the enslavement and conversion of the gentios or pagans of Brazil. The what? The enslavement. Who? American Indians, not Africans. In it, Nobrega frequently used Negro for Indio. All right. And when he refers to the people of El Gato, an American leader, as Negroes, later, in a footnote states that Nobrega used, and this is what he wrote. All right. If you want to read it, if you know Portuguese, go ahead. So in other words, Nobrega used both Negro and Indio for Americans. All right. Interchangeably. Negro being used in the sense of the opposite of white, and later gives several examples. In May 1557, Pires wrote to Nobrega that bauticé el hijo del gato. Wow. I baptized the son of the cat, and I married him to a Negro woman. So keeps going. It says, thus Pires refers to El Gato's son's wife as Negra, which, she's an Indian. While a sentence later, he says Indio. All right. A month later, Antonio Blasquez wrote from Bahia to Father Ignatius Loyola in Rome to the effect that an American with his negra wished to be baptized. In April of 1558, Blasquez, in another letter to Rome, noted that most conversions were being made among the slaves, American, whom the Portuguese treated like horses and beasts. You hear that? Burying them in los mulatares, mule yards or dung heaps, and that the Portuguese, todos tienen, they're saying they all got Negroid women who they have sin with, right? They may commit sin. That is, the Portuguese were all living in sin with American women, and most possessed slaves, all right? So again, they were calling them Negras, guys. American women, okay? 1500s, primary sources, before your whole false narrative started coming in. In February 1559, Antonio de Sá of Espíritu Santo, writing of the Jesuits of Bahia, used Negro for American and noted that El Gato, alias Vasco Fernandez, oh, that's his name. That's his real name. You call him El Gato, huh? Had come with French goods, de manera que casi todos los negros viñao vestidos. Thus, El Gato's native people, called Negroes, were wearing French clothes. They had them wearing French clothes, these Negro Indians, right? Now they looking like French. Like, wait, you're getting confused. You might get them confused with the Huguenots. Don't get them confused with the Huguenots now. In June 1559, Saad referred to Vasco Fernandez, principal de los Indios, and to his son Mane Maucu, el pobre Negro. All right, you see how many sources? Well, we're gonna go over this. Similarly, one of estos gentiles, these pagans, was called El Negro, etc. All right. In July 1559, Nobrega wrote to Portugal that the Christians, Portuguese, were, for the most part, living in the interior areas with their Negroid women as mistresses, and that their slaves were also living together without proper marriage. Nobrega also wrote in a letter to the governor that 8 Negroes of Guinea were killed by a party of 60 valiant Negroes. Make it make sense, right? By using Negroes in Guinea for Africans and Negroes for Native Americans or American Indians. So again, are they really coming for Guinea, or are they coming from the Guinea coast, Cape Verde? Cape Verde, like guys, this is what I'm saying. A lot of these islands, Sao Paulo, San Tomas, the Madeiras, the Canary. This is especially Cape Verde. They were calling that part of the Guinea coast, not even mainland. In September 1561, Father Leonard do Valle wrote to Rome that another Jesuit was muy suave to whites as to Negroes in his work in Brazil. The next year, June 1562, do Valle also wrote to Rome using Os Negros for Americans, while in June 1565 he wrote to the Jesuits of Portugal about whom Negro bautizado, and he also uses a Negro for a tamoyo in a footnote. The editor states Negro por Indio. All right, so that's their language. Says thus Negro is used for Indian, not for someone from Africa. Okay, thus Negro is used for Indian, not for someone from Africa. Anybody confused about this right now? Raise your hand if you're confused with what they're saying. So if you guys missed the source, catch the video from the beginning, when you can. Or you can play that right now. You don't have to, be live. You can go right to the beginning. I always show my sources. But it's not about one book, guys. All right, it's not about one book. He's quoting many different primary sources, which we're going to get to. So the editor suggests that a European copyist might have been responsible for this usage, but as we have seen, it is too consistent over the years to require such an explanation. In any case, it is clear that many Iberians and Italians, whether in Europe or America, were comfortable in using Negro, Negri, or etc. for Americans. They were very comfortable calling American Indians the N word, right? Father Joseph de Achiera, another prominent Jesuit in Brazil between 1570 and 1584, carefully refers to and says Africans as Negros de Guinea, while calling Americans Indios de la Terra, Esclavos de Terra or Brasis. Other Jesuits sometimes use the form India Brasilica, concubina, concubine, right? Brasilica or lengua brasilica. Okay, let me see if I can find something here. Bradley. One second, guys. I'm looking. Just want to show you guys something. I think I'm making all this up, right? By the way, check out my Cape Verdean video if you don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm going to try to show it right now. So here we go. This is one. So Hawkins, right? John Hawkins. Yeah. Okay. So this is basically a very scholarly source when it comes to some of these voyages, recorded voyages, historic. Says in English, Gardner Voyages and Travels, mainly during the 16th and 17th centuries, volume 1, right? And that's the source. Says, again, Hawkins made for Tenerife. And his friend Pedro de Ponte, again, he provided himself with the needful information in the very house of his rivals. Again, he prospected successfully for slaves on the Guinea coast. Oh, on the Guinea coast. Also, these are like the ones they listen, guys. What are they saying? So, the ones that were coming from the Guinea, right? Guinea what? Guinea coast. They were calling them the Negroes of Guinea, and then they were calling the ones in America the Negroes of the land, right? So, Hawkins, John Hawkins, right, famous slaver, right, who was one of the first to bring slaves over, supposedly, Africans, supposedly. It says that he was prospecting the Guinea coast, going every day on shore to hunt his Negroes with burning and spoiling of their towns. And again, he crossed to the West Indies, but not this time to Hispaniola, right? So he got some Negroes from the Guinea coast and brought them to America, right? So in the footnote, if you see number 2 here where it says Guinea coast on the top, it says number 2. If you go down to the footnote, which I haven't found, it says just at the same time, the Garrett Company's fleet with the Minion as flagship sailed for Guinea and was discomfited off Lamina. Hawkins was much aggrieved at the information given by the Minion's people to certain Negro tribes near Cape Verde, of nature very gentle and loving, whom he was attempting to kidnap. Okay? So when you're talking about these people going to the Guinea coast, guys, you guys are going to see if you start following the primary sources, they were literally not even going into the mainland. They were going to San Tomas Island, the Cape Verde Islands, the Azores, Madeiras, like off the coast, like these islands, Cape Verde especially. And what we know by this time, when we're talking about when John Hawkins went, I think in the 1550s or 60s, we already knew, we proved that even since Columbus times, Columbus himself brought American Indians as slaves to Cape Verde. They were bringing many American Indian slaves to Cape Verde. Also, the undesirable Sephardic Jews and Moors that were getting caught up in the Inquisition were ending up in Cape Verde, especially the Portuguese. That's why they supposed to been colonized with Portuguese, but it's a lot of the Sephardic Portuguese and American Indian ancestry in Cape Verdeans. So again, when we talk about, they keep saying Guinea, what Guinea? Guinea coast, you mean Cape Verde? And what time period you talking about? Like, we got the whole video, what I'm talking about right now, guys. Like, you can catch up, just put Cape Verde, Kurimeo, blah, blah, blah. You see what I'm showing? Or just go to my slave videos, my real slave trade series too. Watch both of them. Watch all of them. The real slave trade, part 1. You'll see how prominent the Portuguese were enslaving American Indians and bringing them to Cape Verde, bringing them to Lisbon, bringing them over to West, bringing them to Africa. So then a lot of these people were ending up coming back. This is what I'm trying to explain to you. That's what they were doing. It says in 1501, the Portuguese began to depopulate Labrador. This is from the book Lies My Teacher Told Me. Transporting, listen, the Nova Scotia, Labrador area up there, Maine, transporting the now extinct Butog. Now you're extinct. Remember what? You're not extinct. You're still here. To Europe and Cape Verde as slaves. Where? To Europe and Cape Verde as slaves. The whole Botog nation, huh? The whole Botog nation now extinct because you enslaved them and you reclassified them and you started calling them Negroes, right? And the whole Natchez nation sent to chains to the West Indies. Not all of them, but yeah, majority, their leaders, their chiefs, family, all that. Like, this is just examples, guys. Like, hold on. Had another thing here I wanted to show. Can't find it now, but yeah, it's a good video. Go check it out. All right, going back, I'm showing you guys this for reference. Like, so refers to the Africans or Negroes of Guinea. What Africans? You mean from Cape Verde? Now, if you're talking about Cape Verde, I'm going to question who these people are. Calling Americans Indios de Terra, Escravos de Terra, right? So they're distinguishing, basically, is the point, though, between these other people of color with the ones from the Americas. Other Jesuits sometimes use the form India Basilica. Okay, we got that. So in 1587, a secular author, Gabriel Suarez de Souza, mentions Africans as Negros de Guinea and Pretos de Guinea, while Americans are usually called Indios de Terra. On the other hand, Suarez refers to an American Tupinamba woman as being muito preta, or very black, as contrasted with her son who was Tau Albo, very white, and albino also. He was an albino. Not because he's actually white, she had an albino, right? The father was not very preto. The occasional use of Negro for Americans seems to continue into the 18th century. In 1602, for example, a Portuguese reportedly was living on Fernão de Noronha Island, all right, that's in Brazil, I believe, with 13 or 14 Negroes. In 1612, however, the French found a Portuguese there with a few tapuyas of both sexes. That's who they were classifying as Negroes, right? So when they got there, basically they're saying they found out it was just Indians that he had listed as Negroes. So strategically, this franchising the Indians, starting to call them Negroes, that this franchises them. Now you're allowed to even enslave them, you treat them even more like your property. In 1648, the Jesuit Antonio Vieira wrote, Sem negros, now Pernambuco, meaning without Negroes, no sugar and no Pernambuco. Since American slaves, all right, American slaves served in the sugar industry of Pernambuco, all right, and who was in charge of these sugar plantations in Pernambuco? Who was fleeing there, guys? Pop quiz: Sephardic Jews and Moors. Sephardic Jews and Moors own all these. These were black folks too. The ones making the Indians work in their plantations. And what they were doing as well, bringing in undesirables from Europe to work in these sugar plantations as well. I got the whole book right here. The Bristol Registers of servants sent to foreign plantations from 1654 to 1686, all right, by Peter Wilson Coldharm. Go ahead and look it up if you like. I got specific names, where they went, what island, what place in Americas, for how many years as an indentured servant. Yeah. So in Pernambuco, especially, like that's a big Sephardic Jewish spot and pirate spot, you know. So since American slaves served in the sugar industry, though, right, this was the people they were enslaving in general from the very beginning through the 1580s, from the very beginning, meaning since the 1400s, since they got there. And later, the term Negro in this case is very probably equivalent to slave. All right, Negro became equivalent to slave. Now, even on top of the hijacker, you're getting called Negro. Now your status became slave, because now Negro, right, they were associating to slave. Now that's why Negro in the will, Negro when it could be the owner's son out of wedlock. Now he's just a Negro in the will, but he's passing on this so-called Negro to his daughter. He's not just selling it to anybody, he's giving it to his daughter, right? So he can stay in the family. Because a lot of times these so-called Negroes in the wills are family, believe it or not, or related to them. In a letter of Antonio Vieira from Rio de Amazonas to Portugal, March 24, 1661, he writes, so this is what he writes. In this case, it would seem that Vieira uses Negro for Indio in the second sentence quoted. In 1712, Raphael Bluetooth's Dictionary of Portuguese and Latin was published, a significant development in that he was one of the earliest dictionary makers to incorporate Brazilian terms of special interest in his definition for Mameluco, no livro 8, de sua historia, chapter 4, de Incolis Brasilae, from George Magravo. All right, this is Portuguese. Hold on, let's get to the. So Bluetooth thus states that in Graves' Natural History of Brazil from the 1640s, all right, primary sources, guys, the term Mameluco was used for the child of a European father and a Negro mother. And remember, that's an Indian they're talking about, right? The Negro. And when you're talking about European father, don't assume white. I just told you guys who is colonizing this area. First, who's there mainly? Who are these so-called Portuguese? Mameluco. That's why they're not even calling him mulatto. He's just a Mamaluco. George Margrave had gone to Brazil during the Dutch occupation. His notes on the natural history of the area were edited by Jean de Laet and published in 1648 in Latin, with the original Latin edition actually states it's quinatus. All right, so that's the Latin, which means that is that the child of a Brazilian mother and a European father is called a Mamaluco. Don't assume white and black, guys. Get it? Like, get out of that. They're telling you, they're trying to tell you something bigger here. Somehow, Bluetooth or some predecessor chose to substitute Negro for Brazilian. You see that? Margrave had used Ethiopian for African rather than Negro. Mameluco in the period referred to an American European mixed blood, primarily if not exclusively. Yo mama. Yo mama. In 1755, a Portuguese law extended personal freedom to the to Americans of Grau-Pará and the Maranhão in Brazil, with the exception of those whose mothers were slaves of African descent, so-called. So this is the clause. It says, among the many regrettable practices which have resulted in the disparagement of the Indians, one prime abuse is the unjustifiable and scandalous practice of calling them Negroes. You guys hear that? Scandalous. It's scandalous. Perhaps by so doing, the intent was no other than to induce in them the belief that by their origins they had been destined to be the slaves of whites. Listen, as is generally conceded to be the case of blacks from the coast of Africa. Oh, not like the same as the ones from the coast of Africa. But whites and blacks here, we're talking about status. Status, right? Not complexion. The directors will not permit henceforth that anybody may refer to an Indian as a Negro, nor that they themselves may use this epithet among themselves, as is currently the case. This Portuguese usage is extremely significant, not only because American or part American slaves could be referred to as Negroes in early records, but also because it is very much affects one's analysis of population statistics in colonial Brazil. All right, telling you something big here. Where in fact the categories of Negro and Escravo or slave must often include enslaved American Indians and mixed bloods. That's why you think it was millions of Africans. You think, because you assume Negro and slave meant African, when in fact it's telling you where in fact the categories Negro and slave must have often included enslaved American Indians, which we proved. Go check out my series, The Real Slave Train. An analysis of modern Brazilian census data would, I believe, demonstrate that Americans and part Americans are still being classified as Negroes, all right? Are still what? Are still being reclassified, are being classified as what? Negroes, pretos, for certain purposes, all right? For certain purposes. They have their reasons, and you don't know. In India, the Portuguese also frequently use the term Negro for Indians, as well as Baco or darkish. Alva or Branco white was sometimes used for light-skinned persons of more Muslim Arab background. More Muslim Arab background. Alfonso de Albuquerque in the very early 1500s encouraged his men to marry the white widows of dead Muslims. Not the black ones. Ethnic cleansing at Goa, but he did not want them to marry the black women of Malabar. You see that? Hey, Ree, you got to catch up. It's not what I'm saying, it's what we prove, all right? So if you are genuinely asking to know or just emotionally asking and you're trying to question me because you don't want to believe it, that's two different things. So if you are, though, being real and you want to know, catch up on the videos. I just told you, watch the real slave trade. Catch up on my videos. They lied to us, man. Yes, we exposed the false West African slave trade. The slaves weren't coming from West Africa in general, and very little, if any. We've proven that. The sources for the slaves, I'm showing you one source. We're talking about one source right here. American Indians, massively. American Indians who were eventually called Negroes, blacks and Africans, and are still being called that today. Nobody's claiming anything, man. That's what people claim. People believe whatever they tell them, and they don't we're not talking about what the general mass population believes, all right? But again, go ahead and catch up because now you're interrupting the live. Welcome to the channel. You're about 8 years behind, but you're right on time at the same time, right? If you really care, go ahead and go to the oldest videos and work your way up. We got thousands of hours of research. The research speaks for itself. We're not here, again, this ain't personal. You got to let your emotions go through and you got to deal with them, and you got to empty your cup, right? We was brainwashed. We're indoctrinated with a lie out of African theories and these false, trying to Africanize everybody in the world that's so-called black. Every continent had black folks. All right, Ree? Everybody was melanated, different shades. Like it was explaining earlier. Like if you missed the beginning of this reading, he was trying to break this down. I don't think we have to like block or delete him, but he said there's one book. That's what, was he talking like he was trying to talk some smack? Is he talking some smack? Like, yeah, if he's talking smack, get him out, guys. They're gonna get emotional. They're gonna get emotional, especially if they straight hardcore Pan-Africans. Yeah, it's hardcore Pan-Africans. We don't care about no crybabies right now. We don't care about none of that right now. Yeah, shout out to the producers for the soundtrack today. Yeah. So they were doing the same thing in India, in Hindustan. You know? We're gonna let them reflect a little bit. Everybody reflect a little bit. All right. Yeah. Okay, that was some good reflection. He had an epiphany. Man down. All right. That's not even the point of this, right? Like, we're trying to help people, inform people, right? But sometimes the same people that question like this, they don't make time to learn. So I know a lot of people say, "Why you go at people so? Why you so rude?" Where I'm like, I'm not rude. I can read people. You know, it's talking about one book. There was one book is quoting hundreds of primary sources, but that's the thing. People don't know what a primary source is. Yet they want to go with beliefs that they can't even prove. But when we're showing them a primary source, then they start questioning. They want to question and practice cognitive dissonance. The research speaks for itself over these last 8 years. Like we are past trying to prove what we're teaching today or reviewing today, going over again. Because again, I do have a lot of new subscribers, and I have people like Reed that coming out of nowhere. They're just like, whoa. I'll let y'all rock. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. All right. All right. All right. All right, Reed. You know, you just stick around. You get timed out for the day. You don't get to talk anymore, but stick around, man. Let's see how real you are. If you're gonna be learning and catching up on the videos and verifying and trying to debunk any of them, I dare you. I've been waiting 8 years for one Pan African to. I'll let y'all rock. It's not a y'all, it's me. This is my channel. It's not about y'all, man. Don't be mad because other people are in, go with sources and truth and don't follow people blindly like most other people, like seems like you do probably. Okay. So we're gonna continue. We had a good little break there with Ree. And we live. Hopefully nobody gets mad. I always get a comment like, why you stopped? I was so in tune to the reading. Why you gotta go? Man, I gotta do this sometimes, all right? We live. That's why I don't go live all the time. I got pre-recorded videos most of the time. Enjoy those. When I'm live, I gotta do it now. We gotta address it now. The hijack gets slayed right away. So they're calling all the Hindus the same thing, right? And trying to ethnically cleanse all these people, trying to marry people of lighter complexions. In 1645, an Italian Franciscan in India referred to the Indians generally, the people of the country, as blacks. A Christian bishop of Brahmin ancestry consecrated at Rome in 1635 was never allowed to officiate in Portuguese territory and was called by Jesuit a bare-bottomed N-word. You see? In 1750s, the Portuguese government made it illegal to refer to Indians as Negroes and other insulting and opprobrious terms. In 1759, the viceroy at Goa issued an edict denouncing the contempt with which the natives of this state of India are treated by the Europeans, who called them the N-words, curs, and other insulting names, for no other reason than the difference of color. Nonetheless, the above decree outlawing the use of Negro for Indians was not promulgated by the authorities of Goa until 1774. One can see then that with Indians and Americans both being referred to as Negroes in the 1500s and later, all right? Indians and Americans both referred to Negroes in the 1500s. One cannot be at all certain of the ethnic identity of Negroes sold in Portugal or of those resold in Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, and elsewhere. Boom! That's what I was saying earlier. So who are all these so-called Negroes now? They're shuffling around the world. When we know they were bringing American Indians to these places, we got the primary sources to prove it, and the ship manifests and everything. He's letting you know, he's making you reason, all right? He's not just saying this out of nothing. He's letting you know, if you do research, you're logically going to start concluding and seeing this. But you got to get over your beliefs, get over what you thought was real, and verify the info and do the research. Learn what a primary source is. Learn what records are, real historical records, not somebody's view from the 1900s. And creating these movements based on crayon colors. As we review usage in Spain, it will become clear that both Indians and Americans were also on occasion called Negroes in that country. In these countries where Spain, Italy, Netherlands, he broke it down. That's what I'm saying. Go watch my real slave trade video, how they were bringing American Indians to these places and then reclassifying them as Negroes. A Portuguese land dictionary of 1592, written before 1569, states Negro cativo, Etiot, Negra a Etiopisa, Nigracusa, and then you see the words, right? And then Preto, right? It all means the same. What is this? All the same. Thus, a captive Negro is equivalent to Ethiopian, which would seem to refer especially to Black Africa. On the other hand, Negracusa, sometimes something black, and Preto refer only to concepts of black. A dictionary 1611 is similar, except that Negro de Guinea is equivalent to Ethiopian. Preto and Negro are both equivalent to Latin black. Latin black, huh? An English Portuguese dictionary 1701 had these equivalents. So it says blackness, that's like saying Negro in Portuguese, right? It says black equals Kuza. Look at that, Kuza, huh? Kuza, like the Kuza Indians. Preta, Kuza Preta, that's like thing, same thing, right? Kuza. And then Negro woman, dark, oscura, or sombra, like shady. A black Moor equals Moro, Mora, or naturales Ethiopia, and so on. You guys see the definitions, right? Thus, the term Kafre, Kafir, is equivalent to Negro. Kafre was widely used in the Indian Ocean region, especially. Interestingly, Black Moor was equated with Moru without a color. Listen, without a color qualification. That's deep right there. You guys understand that? And the Moor could be a white Muslim, as well as with Ethiopian. Further, black was equivalent to sombre or obscure color, dark color, as well as Negro and Preto. Bloto in 1712 stated the following: Negro, and then it goes in Latin. The Terra dos Negros was defined as lying beyond Libya and the Sahara. Preto is defined as Negro. It says, Bloto also states for Preto. Okay, so there you guys see. You can pause it and read yourself the Latin and the Portuguese, right? In short, by 1712, Bloto was able to identify slave status with the term Preto. Other evidence indicates that as the years went by, Negro became a harsher term than Preto and more like North American N-word, like how they started using it. In 1784, Portuguese-French dictionary has this word, right? Esclavo, slave, and all that. Thus, the connotations of Negro equals slave were well established. A figurative meaning being to treat someone harshly or very cruelly as a slave. You see that? Negro equals slave. So a lot of times they're saying these Negroes, they're not talking about because they from Africa. That's just their status. I'm trying to explain this to you. And it's very important to understand a lot of this when you're doing your genealogy, guys. Hey, Crystal's Corner, I appreciate you. Thank you very much for that. Shout out to Crystal's Corner. So, a figurative meaning, right? Negro and slave were well established. A figurative meaning being to treat someone harshly or very cruelly as a slave. In 1836, another dictionary maker pointed out that Negro, in addition to referring to obscure darkness, such as on night without stars or moonlight, also possessed connotations of a moral nature, sadness, for example, while Preto referred properly to the color of something burned and was never used in a moral sense. Yeah, appreciate you, Crystal. J.I. Roquette, in his Portuguese-French dictionary of 1862, equated negra with negress, or slave, a black slave, or Negro. right? It keeps going. Thus, the meaning of Negro as black slave is made very specific. You see, that's even more disfranchisement on top of disfranchisement. Paper genocide, and then you get disfranchised on top of that. Wow. Now it becomes status, equivalent to being treated like property. Antonio Brasio, in his study of pretos in Portugal, states explicitly Negroes, and it goes on, says, thus Negro had become synonymous with slave, and preto was preferred as nicer term, preto, which the Cape Verdeans use all the time for black, preto. I grew up with Cape Verdeans, guys. That's why I know a lot of like the culture. It seems very likely that by the beginning of the 18th century, and probably earlier in Brazil and other colonies, Negro had already acquired its negative meaning of slave or slave-like, all right? Thus, the Portuguese later used the term Negro as an equivalent to slave, and as a term of abuse is also well illustrated by many works on Brazil and Portugal, which cite poems, songs, and sayings which convey a negative image of Negroes. A modern Portuguese dictionary says of a Negro woman or negra, right? It says, and it's in Portuguese, woman of black color, a slave, a woman who works a lot. That's literally the definition for Negro woman. You see that? That's so racism messed up. And then again, so who are these so-called Negro women? The American Indian women in general, right? They were telling us, right? Body bag for the illusion. That's right, Nitzia. Appreciate you all. Thank you very much. Much love, mucho amor, mi hermana. Thank you. Thank you. We cheap chat. Me and her, we cheap chat. We relate through the cheap chat culture. She's Panamanian. I'm from Costa Rica, but we're anciently connected through my Huetar people and her cheap chat people who spoke the cheap chat language coming from the South America, the Arawak and Carib people. Yeah. Machahab. Appreciate you. Thank you. So Negro is similar. But it starts talking in Portuguese again. I can say, que de cor escura, preta, sombrio, fusco de negrito, vil, odioso, indigno, adverso, homem de raça negra, homem que trabalha muito. You think I can't? You think I can't do it? C.R. Boxer, the noted historian of the Portuguese Empire, translates Portuguese Negro as English, the N-word, and states the following: the Portuguese habit of referring to Indians, Sinhalese, and even to Chinese and Japanese as the N-words was fairly widespread and lasted longer than is usually realized. He knows that the Maratha War of 1737 to 40 in India was partly caused when a Portuguese official called a leading Maratha man the N-word, a word which they interpret as slave, for they were assured that this was what we called the Kafirs of Mozambique. The Portuguese were, of course, selling Kafirs as slaves in India and used the term Negro as well as Kafir to describe them. That's a major drop right there, because what does that relate to? I showed you guys in the 1560s, I showed you even in the 1800s, as recent as the 1800s, when cameras were just coming out. I showed you what so-called Indian or Hindustan people look like, the Sinhalese, all these Southeast Asian people look like, really. That's why they're calling them the N-word. Don't try to reason like, oh, maybe it's because they just, no, it's not just because they're slaves. They were literally so-called black folks. All right, now all that is coming out. Now you see all these little shorts on TikTok and everything and Instagram. Oh, the first Koreans were, oh, they got white. Oh, the Chinese were black. And they're showing this black. Like, I've been trying to tell you guys. Look, they were calling them the N-words. Not just because they were slaves. It is also very significant that an Italian, Filippo Sassetti, who lived in Lisbon and various Portuguese colonies in the 1570s and 1580, specifically refers in a letter of 1585 to the Americans of Brazil as Negri, writing in Italian. He reserves the word Indiani for the people of India. We may justifiably suppose that his use of Negri reflects Portuguese usage. We may note again that many Jesuit letters to Rome using Negro for Americans. Using what? The word Negro for what? For American Indians. for American Indians, right? Let's see if I can find something I got here. 1 second, guys. Since we're live again. Yeah. Okay, I can't find it now, but you guys know we've shown. I mean, he's letting you know here, and that he's in these primary sources. But we've shown like Oxford Dictionary, we've shown encyclopedias where the word Negro, is telling us was applied to American Indians first. Was applied to American Indians first before anybody in the Americas, right? So, insofar as the term Negro in the Portuguese Empire became synonymous with slave or with servile status, it, of course, lost any mandatory color reference and became a general term of abuse. This usage, of course, with an earlier Portuguese tendency to use the words Saraceni and later Moor to refer to enslaved persons in preference to servi or slave. Unfortunately, many English speaking authors tend to translate Negro as black rather than as the N word or slave, and have failed to see the implications for Brazilian history of the above distinctions. The use of Negro in Spanish. The Spaniards in Spain seem to have also been inclined to utilize the term Negro in a broad sense to include darker Americans and Indians at least. First, however, it is necessary to discuss the way in which Negro was used in Spain. In the early years, it seems to have been merely a designation of color, usually contrasted with blanco or loro. In Valencia between 1480 and 1510, for example, one finds the following kinds of descriptions for slaves: white Moorish, all right, listen, female, that's a slave; black and white captives, black Moorish female; a Jollof or Wolof from Senegal. Without the term Negro, he was just a slave automatically. There's Turk, Canary Island female, black female of Jollof, white female, listen, black of Barbary, two captives, one of white called Mubarich, age 45 years, and the other black named Ahmed, age 30 years. A Jew from Barbary, a Jew, huh? Barbary, what kind? Sephardic, Aladabi, Bedouin, Moors of Barbary, a white Canary Islands captive, a black female of Tripoli, Almosora, age 17 years, Arab as well as Loros and Indians and Americans called Negroes, to be discussed below. It is clear that there was no noticeable tendency to use the term Negro either for slave or as general replacement for other descriptions. The children of a white and Negro were called either Loro or white. A Spanish authority knows that also some children of a white man and a black female were whites. In 1525, in the Canary Islands, one knows Juanico, child of white color, his slave, son of Maria, his black slave. The boy was classified as being of white color, and he and his Negro mother were slaves of the same owner, yet he was being classified as white. All right, you guys paying attention? In records of the Canaries, one finds repeated references to the color negro from 1523 to 1538 to 1560, the color loro, 1538, the color algo basa, of somewhat darkish color, the basa, that's like swarty, in 1557, and the color blanco, in addition to the innumerable cases where the color is clearly implied. A lot of pages still left, but we're gonna keep going for today. All right, you guys enjoying it? Yeah. Okay. The list of Negroes and others sold in Las Palmas after 1514 include descriptors such as Negra Berberisca, or right, all these different terms, Negro Morisco. Look at the different tags they put on all these people, right? These are slaves being sold, right, in La Palma. Negra Bosal or Moro Negro. What do you mean Moro Negro? I thought it was the same thing. Blanca, white, Blanca, Negro, Ladino, a Ladino Negro. Look at this. Cabo Verde, Preta and Preto. Listen, a Cabo Verde, straight up, a Cape Verde. Blanco Morisco, Negro Mandinga, Morena Rare, Negro Jollof or Wolof, Negro from Guinea, along with Loros, Indios, Moros, Maguera Bombas, etc. In 1549, one finds Juliana, a mulatta of 25, as sister to Gaspar, a Negro of 16. You see that? So that's his brother. She's being called mulatta, he's being called Negro, and they're brother and sister. Just like what we be finding on American US Census, right? In your family's genealogy. A lot of you. Same kind of thing, right? A change perhaps begins in 1580s when one finds Negro Loro. This term is repeated on occasion, as in 1563, 1569, 1586, and 7, and 1591, and might imply that a Loro was being classified as a Negro. Okay? In fact, however, it appears to be shorthand for Negra algo lora, or black almost brown. 1567, Negro casi lora. 1580, and Preta más lora que negra, more brown than black. 1584, one also finds a Negra with a mulatto son, or a Negro amulatado, a mulatto type Negro, it says. 1582, that is a mulatto-ish Negro-ish, a Negra with a mulatto son, presumably 1584. Thus, it appears that in general it is color which is being described throughout the 16th century, along with occasional references to religion, place of birth, or nationality, berberisco, etc. As noted earlier, the late 16th and early 17th centuries witnessed a proliferation of new colored terms, including Negro, atezado, very black, membrillo, cocido, stewed, quince or quince, a moreno, claro, clear, mulatto, leonado, lionish, a lionish look, etc. Most of these terms were clearly color focused, not ethnically focused, like color focused. Nonetheless, they may also have been a tendency in the 17th century to broaden the concept of Negro to encompass lighter shadings. In 1695, a Spaniard stated that it was necessary to include the Negroes captured along the Mediterranean coast and taken to Sicily as infidel Moros. This is against their wars with the Moors, right? Because all of these are Negroes of lionish, leonado color, which is known as membrillo cocido. They are Moros of the religion of Muhammad, and it is possible to capture them just as they capture us. Uh-oh. They ain't all dark, they're saying. The significant thing here is that these Muslims of Leonardo or lionish and stewed quince color were called Negroes. Why Negroes if they were not of Negro color? Good question. Fulos, Fulani, right? We just did a video. And a lot of these African tribes, like Fulani and the Mandingo, right? Regarded as being of Fulo color, similar to Membrillo Cocido, although also on occasion as Negro. Our analysis must now review the cases where Indians and Americans were called Negro, since such usage may well imply that the 1695 statement quoted above reflected earlier attitudes as well. All right. In Valencia, one finds in 1504 Antonio, formerly Sutme, the Calicut, of 12 years old, called Negro. In 1507, Antonio, of 10 years old, of Calicut, called Negro. In 1515, Cristobal, of 18 years old, from the India. What India? Called Negro. In 1515, named now Francisco, 22 years old, the Calicut, called Negro. And also in 1515, Francisco, she was 27, Bombay, and Gonzalo, 25, of Chochiti, India, both Negroes. One also finds a few cases where Indians had no color descriptor given or were called lor, as with slave from Malacca, India in 1514. One individual was classed as Lord Casi Negro in 1515. In any case, it is clear that Indians were often designated as Negroes in Spain, but that a light color might lead to a different designation in a few cases, especially if they were from Malaya. Insofar as Americans are concerned, the pattern is somewhat similar. As noted earlier, many of the slaves from Terra Nova, from Newfoundland, right? Who did we say? The Botoc Indians from Labrador, Newfoundland. They got taken where? To Cape Verde, right? So also to Portugal, also to Lisbon. So a lot of these American Indians became slaves in the 1500s, guys, and 1600s from Terra Nova or Newfoundland and were called Negroes. Okay? That's historically proven. So if they did it in this case, how many times did they actually really do this? Where now you're thinking, oh, these are all African people. Although some were not categorized at all and one was classified as Lora. Other Americans in Valencia, right, in Spain, were classified thus. In 1495, no color mentioned. 1509, from Terra de Negros, Brazil. 1509, Lora for Brazil. 1512, Negro de Indias. All right, these American Indians, right? 1514, no color. 1515, two as Loras Oscuras, like dark Loras, right? Brazil, but also counted as Negroes. 1515, Negroes. These are all American Indians, right? 1516, 85 from Brazil as Negroes, right? All Indians being reclassified as Negroes, right? 1516, Blanca. We got a Blanca, or a light-skinned one. 1516, four Blancos from Paranompo, so lighter skinned ones. Thus, it seems clear that Americans could be described as Negroes in Spain, but that other distinctions such as Loro or even Blanco might on occasion be used. One must also note that the case where Loras Oscuras could be counted as Negroes, 1515, because it resembles the 1695 attitude cited above, that is, to somehow use the term Negro with a double meaning, on the one hand to refer to black, dark color, and on the other hand to point towards some broader concept such as a non-white. My data does not allow for further clarification of this issue, but it is to be suggested that there was a strong tendency to classify all persons originated in the Terra de Negros, Ethiopia or Africa south of the Sahara, as Negroes regardless of actual skin color, no matter if they were even white North Africans. Listen, just like the definition of free white in the Black's Law Dictionary, right? What does it say? It includes Moors. Free whites includes Moors and Sephardic Jews. So, for example, Fulanis. By the same token, the concept of Negro was extended to other tropical and non-Western peoples, if of brown color, but not to the exclusion of the use of other color terms or ethnic names. Moreover, one has to note that Valencia notion 1509 that Brazil was part of the Terra de Negros. In 1611, a Spaniard noted that Negro was, all right, this is what he's saying. Quite clearly, Negro had negative connotations and was seen as being at an extreme among the colors, opposed to white at the other extreme, all right? We're talking about status too, not just complexion. Proverbs were already existed, such as although blacks, we are people, and in the bath everyone enters without light, and therefore one cannot tell who is black or white unless they are discovered talking. Hey, much love, Frankie Green. Appreciate you. Thank you for that. You're very welcome. Appreciate you. Given these ideas, it might prove easy to extend Negro to include unfortunate persons of brown color, especially if being sold as slaves. Especially if their status became as a slave, they just Negroes. Don't matter if they're American Indians or Black Europeans. But this is what he leaves out of this, like right here, but because he's not there yet, like fully, right? But given these ideas, it might prove easy to extend Negro to include unfortunate persons of brown color, especially being sold as slaves. All right, who got brown color complexion? Raise your hand. It should be noted that during the 16th and 17th century, slaves were constantly running away while others were given their freedom. The free people of color could be arrested as fugitives from slavery if they did not possess a document proving their right to liberty. They could be jailed and sold, all right? Oh, we know the stories, right? We know the slave net. Yeah, we know what happened. The disfranchisement of black folks or people by their complexion, by their darkness. And now you got to prove you're free. Because now that color got associated with slavery, huh? In 1589, Melchor Diaz, a man de color de membrillo cocido oscuro, or dark, oscuro, or darkish, was arrested. Diaz stated that his father and mother were both free people and that neither they nor any predecessors had been captives or slaves. But for being the color he is, it was presumed to pretend that he was a slave. Oh, what we got here? Racial categorizing, huh? Classifying people by their color. Uh-oh, like what happens today, right? Oh, you can't be brown and drive an expensive car, right? Or you can't be just walking around freely like Melchor Diaz in 1589 because they say, hey, show me your papers. Thus, a dark skin color was definitely a disadvantage in Spain. Listen, when away from friends or neighbors, similarly, signs of being a Muslim would arouse suspicion. This is when they were kind of taking over and trying to ethnically cleanse everybody, right? That wasn't always the case in Spain. Spain was very dark from ancient times. And if a membrino cocido or brown skin color, so membrino cocido, they just mean brown skin, was a sign of slavery, right? It is easy to see how the term Negro might be extended in a manner of speaking to such persons. In 1579, as noted earlier, Bartolome Sanchez was captured as a suspected fugitive. He stated that his father was Blanche, or Blanche, and that his mother was Negro, de las Indies, de Portugal. From the Indies, she was an Indian, listen. He's calling her Negro, but she's an Indian from the Indies of Portugal was the Americas, guys. She had been a slave, but Sanchez claimed that he himself was free. In spite of being half white and probably half American, he was termed a black man, un hombre negro, right? Make that make sense, right? See, this is the thing, guys. We are to assume that his dad is white, only because he's from Europe. But when we're talking about, again, these Sephardic Moorish people, these Portuguese, Iberian people coming in the 1500s, in general, guys, they were so-called black folks, melanated people, people of color. All right, that's why he's still a black man. So even though he took the status of his mom, right? Oh, you guys couldn't hear me. My fault. Damn. All right. So yeah, Indian, right? A Negro man run away with the complexion of an Indian, right? They're calling Indians Negroes, right? Hold on, I'm about to show you a couple things, right? Lake Charles Atacapas. They're saying that the savages or the Atacapas, who were the coastal clan of interior tribes, were of a very low type of civilization. They were dark skinned with dirty, short, coarse, black, matted hair. Matted black hair, coarse, thick, right? Thick, coarse. They were dark skinned. This is an actual drawing of them. This is from this book, The Lake Charles Atacapas, from Dr. J. O'Dyer. That's a real historical drawing of the Atacapa people. Okay. Atlantic Journal and Friends of Knowledge, Cyclopedic Journal, Review of Universal Science and Knowledge, Historical, Natural, Medical Arts and Sciences. The Americans cannot have sprung from a single nation because independently of the languages, their features and complexions are as various as in Africa and Asia. We find in America white, tawny, brown, yellow, olive, copper, and even black nations, just like in Africa, right? So it makes sense they will be calling Indians Negroes, guys. They also dwarf people, meaning short people, giants, very tall Indians, 7-footers, 8-footers, handsome and ugly features, flat and aquiline noses, thick and thin lips. All the phenotypes. All the phenotypes, right? The Miller Alice 1519 map of South America. This is how they portray the Indians. Okay. Furthermore, as the coast tribes dwindled, they were compelled to associate and intermarry with the Negroes. What Negroes? All right. This is what I'm saying. When apply that. When do we apply what we're learning today? Every time you see that word. What Negroes? Who are you talking about specifically? Until what happened? They finally lost their identity and were classed with that race, so that a considerable proportion of the blood of the Southern Negroes is unquestionably Indian. From the 19th annual report of the Bureau of American Ethnology to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institute from 1900, all right? Indian slaves. It is not commonly known that in all the southern colonies, Indian slaves were bought and sold and kept in servitude and worked in the fields side by side with Negroes. What Negroes? Because we know they were calling American Indians Negroes and Black Europeans. The definition of American in 1828, Webster's Dictionary, right? It says American, a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races. Copper-colored races, found here by the Europeans. But now they apply that to the descendants of Europeans who mix with the Indians. Copper background, right? Copper, emblem of America, American. Okay, I get it. I'm starting to see. I'm starting to get it. So 1619, right? They say, oh, the first so-called Negroes. Yeah, that's the hijack. Because the reality of the 1619 thing is that these so-called 20-odd Negroes, like I was saying earlier, they were taken as a prize taken by piracy from Spanish ship in the Indies, in the West Indies, in the Caribbean. They were literally off the coast of Mexico when that happened. And not only do we not, they cannot prove these people were African, but these people came in as indentured servants and ultimately have become free Americans. They became free Americans. That's the history they don't teach you guys. The illegal beginnings of American Negro slavery. This was written by lawyers. They were simply indentured for their passage, and they gained their freedom in 4 to 7 years. Not like Kunta Kinte. No, They got freedom dues. We got Hawkins already. Hold on. I got more stuff real quick. Let's show a little bit of Lil Wayne here. Yeah. From Costa Rica. Phenotype. We're not talking about just color, guys. I see it all the time. I see it all the time. Yeah. The Mayas portrayed scenes of the courts of their kings on the sides of magnificent painted cylindrical pots, vases, plates, and drinking vessels, right? Like this. This is how they portrayed themselves. This is not modern drawings. This is how they drew themselves. Look at this right here. Right? Look at that. Oh, I see why they were calling Indians Negroes now of the land. I get it now. Negroes of the land, huh? With dreadlocks, braids. Yeah, tied up. Yeah. Negroes of the land. They're trying to say, why you blackwashing, man? Damn. The Facts on File, Encyclopedia of Word and Phrase Origins, 4th edition, definition and origins of more than 15,000 words and expressions. It says here the N-word. The N-word was also been an offensive derogatory term applied to Indians as well as blacks up until recent times. In fact, the objectionable word was applied to themselves by white mountain men in the early West. What? It don't make sense with what they teach us, right? Yep. So we were just talking about who brought tobacco and showed the people in Spain how to smoke tobacco. This is where we left off, right, in the book. We're going to go back now, guys. But this is what I wanted to show you right here. The History of Signboards from the Earliest Times to the Present Day by Jacob Larwood and John Camden Houghton with 100 illustrations and facsimile, right? So it says blackamoors. Remember, they were calling Indians that. They're calling blackamoor in general for dark complexion, slave, or anything like that. And other dark-skinned foreigners. So blackamoors and other dark-skinned foreigners. They're talking about in England. So who would be dark-skinned foreigners? Indians, because the Indians were dark complexion. 2, have always possessed considerable attractions as signs for tobacconists, and sometimes also for public houses. Negroes with feathered headdresses and kilts. So Negroes with feathered headdresses and quilts. Who were they calling? When they calling Indians Negroes? So why they wearing feathered headdresses and quilts? Because they are Indians. Smoking pipes are to be seen outside of tobacco shops on the continent, as well as in England. Thus, in the 17th century, there was in Amsterdam with the following inscription, right? So who are they depicting? Who are they depicting? Who had the tobacco? That's a Native American plant. When I'm talking about Native American, I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, native to the Americas. We're going to go back to the book now. Hope you like that little break. So, it says the new unassimilated Negroes were introduced smoking tobacco to Seville must have been Americans. All right. It's saying these Negroes introduced tobacco. Who had the tobacco, guys? Who knew how to smoke it and grow it and roll it up and used it? In India's, the Americas, the Spanish crown's official documents seem ordinarily to carefully distinguish between Indios, Negroes, and after 1580 to 1580, mulattoes and mestizos. You see that? Nonetheless, numerous American slaves and servants continued to exist even after 1542, and Caribs, Mapuches, and other rebel tribes were being enslaved legally. Moreover, one must assume that many African American mixed bloods were categorized as Negroes. So that's the haja with them. Many blacks, many Indians. In the early 1560s, a Spanish official wrote to the king that in the island of Puerto Rico, there were above 15,000 Negroes and less than 500 Spaniards. And in all the island of Hispaniola, there may be 2,000 Spaniards and there are over 30,000 Negroes. The same is the case in the island of Cuba and in Veracruz, Puerto de Caballo, which is in Honduras, and in Nombre de Dios, Cartagena, Santa Maria, and the coast of Venezuela, where there are 20 Negroes to one white man. All right. So this is exactly, that was a great example of when you read in these historical sources, A lot of times they don't even say African, it says Negroes. Now we know that the Portuguese and Spanish were calling Indians Negroes, so we can't just conjecture and say, oh, these they're talking about Africans. That's a conjecture. When you got to know real history, what was really going on at the time, and what were people being called, and who was doing that, and why, and all that. It's a lot of context you have to have. It seems certain that the officials was using white and black in the sense of us and them. That is, those who could be counted on to support Spanish control and those who, because of their status, might aid an enemy. He states specifically that the French could capture Santo Domingo with 500 soldiers and by freeing the Negroes, most of whom are Latinos and natives of the land, not Africans. Body bag with the illusion. Who the slaves in Hispaniola? Or, wow, black Iberians, Latinos, and the natives, and the Indians, and by liberating them so that they be no longer slaves, they would kill their own masters. Now, how could Africans have been natives of the land? Listen, at such an early date, unless most of them were half American. You see, like, how could, when did they say they were talking about anybody have? They said Latinos and natives of the land. That's what the primary source says. So you see how he automatically is letting you, well, Latino, it couldn't be Latinos that were the blacks because Latinos are white, huh? Not necessarily. And they're definitely not talking about Africans, they're talking about natives of the land. So that's not even, that's a bad conjecture. It's not that they were half American, they are Americans. That is the reality, guys. American Indians in general and black Europeans, which they used to slavery. That is the more true history. They would kill their, sorry. Sorry, see. They would kill their own master. Now, how could Africans, okay, yep. Moreover, it is well known that the Spaniards were mostly mestizos by that date, and that many of the Negroes were actually of mixed ancestry. So again, a lot of context missing in all of this. Mestizos, Spaniards were also black too, so it is quite obvious then that Negro was not being used in either a color or racial sense, but in the sense of slaves or dangerous others. This is borne out of by an estimate for the population of Santo Domingo, Haiti, made 1560, 5,000 whites, 13,000 mestizos and mulattoes, and 20,000 Negroes, which can be all American Indians, black Europeans, and all that, right? It seems highly likely that the Spaniards referred to slaves generally as Negroes in the Caribbean, partly because the term became the equivalent of slave, but also because such usage allowed them to continue to illegally enslave Americans by disfranchising you guys. Listen, to illegally enslave American Indians without revealing the fact to the authorities of Spain, because now they just Negroes now. Well, we got them from Cape Verde, got them from the Guinea coast. Yeah, right. It is clear that many Spaniards were extremely reluctant to abandon the enslavement of Americans after 1542, and they didn't end, guys. It kept going for a while. Okay, yeah. Ooh, boy, that was a lot of good reading, you know. We're gonna end it right there. This is a long chapter. We got like another 15 or 20 more pages, guys. So we gotta, you know, I can't read another 20 pages. We're gonna be here for another 2 or 3 hours. So I want to make sure the videos are not like that long, so people can actually sit down and learn and watch them, right? Because we know how people who don't like history or care about history, they're not gonna sit down on video like this if it's not, you know, 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long, right? And with images popping up and music and all that to keep them in tune, like their short span attention, you know, their interest with their other priorities, right? Either way, I hope you enjoyed the reading for this, I guess, part 1. We'll continue definitely reading from the book, get more in-depth specifics, and we're also going to go over the primary sources that we went over today. Like in other videos, we're going to go actually find the actual primary sources, because people still try to doubt this, say this is just one book. Yeah. All right. If that helps, if that's what helps you sleep at night, go ahead and assume that, right? Either way, I appreciate you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. I got a lot more videos coming. I'm gonna try to keep busy. And remember, guys, I said that I was gonna start doing genealogies live with people, because it's consuming my time. And so I already got some volunteers. And we're gonna start that probably tomorrow. All right, so tune in tomorrow. I'm probably gonna have a live genealogy, a couple genealogies this week and next week, right? If you're interested in volunteering, and it's got to be live, guys. I'm talking about live. So if you're not interested in getting this done live and you're afraid you don't want to share your name or anything like that, don't contact me. Because I'm trying to tell you, I'm gonna go live with it, publicly, right? So we do this to help everybody understand how to do the genealogy, how to start from scratch all the way up, and also to teach for educational purposes as well. And we got some volunteers, so we're good. Also, hey guys, if you're in Jamaica, let me know. If you're in Jamaica, let me know. Hey guys, something major, major moves that I never thought I'd really be doing. But if you're in Jamaica, let me know. Hit me up. I might be visiting Jamaica, guys. All right. Hit me up. Might do a meet and greet in Jamaica. And yard, all right? Going to the Caribbean. And yard, Kingston Town and all that. We're not just going to the tourist sites. All right. That's enough though. Let me know. Hit me up. What's up? Yeah. I appreciate you guys. Again, this was the book Africans and Native Americans, the Language of Race and the Evolution of Red Black Peoples by Jack D. Forbes. I have this already available in my Patreon, but I'll go ahead and re-upload it for everybody in the Patreon in case you don't have it, right? Appreciate you guys. All right. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Yo. Wow. All right, we're going out. Shout out to the producers, Olmec 12 and Science. Wow.